Hello aspirants, welcome to PW OnlyIAS. I'm here Harpreet Singh with the daily analysis of the Hindu from 7th and 9th of December 2024. Let's begin with today's analysis. So this is the QR code where you can basically find this particular PDF which is important for your analysis and your knowledge along with other material that is required for your preparation. What all topics have we taken for today's analysis? First, the concept of de-dollarization. Next, the economic growth versus emission, that is an editorial that was present in today's newspaper. Along with it, we have the MPC, then we have the National Tuberculosis Elimination Program, EPFO, OCCRP, Mulla Periyar Dam, ESMA, Vibrant Village Program. So let's begin with today's analysis and see what are the various intricacies involved in today's news. Main topics. The important topic that was in the news was no plans for de-dollarization, according to the RBI governor. Now, this is topic one, important. This is relevant from the prelims perspectives also, and for that matter, if you can ask, it can be asked in your general studies paper 3 as well. So what do you mean by de-dollarization? That is very, very important. Now, see, have you always heard that whenever we are talking about importing oil in India, or let us say importing certain commodities from the various countries, the transaction is generally taking place, or mostly taking place, in the terms of dollars, that this is a cost in terms of dollars, or for that matter, other commodities, in spite of the fact that the country among which the transactions are taking place, or some import and export is taking place, that might, where US might not be a stakeholder, but still the transaction is taking place in dollars. Now that is what happens is, that is what we say as the power of dollar, or monopoly of dollar with respect to the transaction or international transaction that take place. Now that creates a lot of issues also. Why? Because that might create an issue that sometimes there might be dearth of dollar, might be. Sometimes United States, because its currency is taken as a currency where people, all the countries or most of the countries are using it as a means of the currency, might create a monopoly and then arm twist the other countries. So there was or has been a conversation among even the BRIC countries and the other groups in order to counter what we say as dollar. For example, when we were importing oil from Russia during the time of the COVID times, when you saw that Russia was giving oil to India at a very cheap prices. At that time, you'll be seeing the transaction was even taking place in terms of rupees. Now, if such things keep on happening, that is going to hurt United States, because its currency will not be used as a means of an international transaction. And US will never want that, because it always wants the other countries to be dependent on it in one or the other way. That is how it has risen as a global power. Now, when we talk about de-dollarization, what does it mean? Please understand. De-dollarization refers to the efforts by the countries to replace the US dollar with other currencies as a global reserved currency. That means, why only dollar? We can have some other currency. Even China is trying to push its currency. And that, again, US will not like that, because, again, its currency being taken as a universal currency, you can say, dollar being a universal currency for transaction and the across the world, that basically creates the power or the new imperial tendencies of United States. And other countries even discussing that is going to hurt the interest of United States. And why it is taking place is, see, the other countries are discussing that, is it feasible to replace dollar with some other, or can the two countries transact based on the local currencies? These are discussions that are going on. Now, reason, the countries aim to reduce the dependence on dollar, mitigate the risk related to the US economic policies and sanctions. Now what happens? Sometimes you see you are dependent on United States dollars for, let us say, international trade, and United States imposes a sanction that is unilateral in nature. That means without consensus from anybody, it imposes a sanction, like it did on Iran, or for that matter on Russia. In that case, it hurts the particular country on which sanctions are imposed very badly. So that is why they want, why should we only be dependent on the United States dollar? There, because the new president has very directly said that he will be using these policies of sanctions on the other countries if the interests of US are not met. So that is why the discussion of de-dollarization is coming up. So related to US economies and sanctions, which can significantly impact the global trade and the financial stability. Now, especially the attempts to de-dollarize have gained momentum, post the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, with sanctions restricting dollar-based transactions, fueling the concerns upon the weaponization of the currency. Now, this is again a problematic situation where when you impose sanctions on certain country, you basically try to stop the trade also from that. There might be dearth of the dollar in that particular country on which a particular country was dependent, and they would like to transact in local currencies with the other countries, like, for example, in case of India, their transaction in terms of dollar was taking, in terms of rupees was taking place. So this is again the term de-dollarization, where you are trying to replace a US dollar. Now, how the dollar dominance basically came up. Please remember, there are various points. Post-World War era, you would be realizing that during the colonial times, even when India was a colony, much before the World Wars also. Now, before the World War, it was a time when United Kingdom, the Great Britain, was a leader with respect to economy, with respect to its so-called culture, with respect to its colonies across the world. But we saw with World Wars the downfall of the British Empire and the rise of the United States. And when the World Wars were over, basically the Great Britain was crippled economically. And that is the time when basically United States rose. And its dominance was already there. So that is why we realized US emerged as a dominant economic power, with its GDP constituted nearly 50% of the global economy at one point. Because already the major powers, if you talk about France, if you talk about, again, Germany, if you talk about Great Britain, they were all just crippled. It was the United States that was again a major power. Again, Russia was also a major power, but US was significantly a very important player because of its wider economic growth, capitalistic economy. So that is why it was one of the means where dollar acceptance was also seen. Next is Bretton Woods Agreement 1944, where delegates from 44 nations agreed to adopt US dollar as a global reserve currency pegged to the gold at that time. Now, automatically, United States actually became a superpower during that time. Russia was also there, but again, United States was always a bigger superpower. So when the Bretton Woods Agreement took place in 1944, it was accepted that, okay, we'll use currency as a dollar as a major reserve currency. And United Kingdom also accepted it because it itself was in a very poor economic condition. So next is global trust. US dollar stability coupled with high trust in the American financial market and governance makes it preferred currency for international trade. Because if you want to adopt any currency as a means of international transactions, you should trust that currency, that it is, for example, if the currency itself value is not stable, then what will happen? People will not trust that. US dollar, over the years we saw that it was a trustworthy currency. Again, very important with respect to contributing to the rise of United States also. So people said, agreed, okay, this is what we can adopt. Next is liquidity. Dollar offers easy access to nominally risk-free US Treasury instruments, which are highly sought after the global investors. So this was also one of the reasons where people wanted to make investments in the US Treasury, where you can do via the dollar. That is why it was globally accepted that, okay, we'll see or adopt US dollar as a global currency reserve. So this is the major thing. Now what happens? The problem is the issues related to the dollar dominance. Economic power concentration. Now because of this, the demand for dollar rose across the world. This basically led to rise of the economy of the United States also. So the dominance of dollar gives US a significant control over the global financial transactions, enabling it to impose even sanctions on particular countries, because then they're more crippled because they're dependent on dollar. Then we have trade deficits. Persistent US trade deficits results in excessive dollar circulation globally, often reinvested in US assets and creating imbalances. Then we have challenges for the other currencies. Attempts like Indo-Russia's rupee-ruble trade face hurdles due to the trade imbalances, leaving one country to surplus currency, which cannot be easily utilized. So what you realize is that a lot of issues arise because of the dollars. There we realize that if you want to transact in dollar, if, for example, India has had good relations with the United States in case when it was transacting with Russia also, in the last point if you see, India said we are going to import oil from Russia and it will be in the ruble and rupees transaction. US did not intervene as such because we know that US is also sees India as a very big market for itself. That is why it kept quiet. But on the other hand, had it been other countries, possibly sanctions would have been imposed on that country also. Now you realize that the dependence on dollar impacts the global or the international affairs too. That means excessive dependence on dollars will also impact the sovereignty of the country with respect to decision making. So that is why the issue of de-dollarization with respect to India did come up in the news also, and with respect to other countries also. That why only dollar? Because it is going to hurt a sovereignty. It is going to lead United States to a more dominant power with respect to the economy. It is also makes the countries vulnerable to the sanctions that can be imposed. Again, any further problems that come up in United States economy will again impact the other countries also, because you realize that the new policies are going to come up with the new president that has come up. So there were discussion that yes, let us have other alternatives also. Now comes the aspect of what is India's stance on de-dollarization. Focus is on de-risking trade rather than moving away from the US dollar. So right now the stand is that we have to reduce risk with respect to trade or transaction that are taking place, and we are not moving away from the dollar as a means of international instrument trading. So you can just note it down also, because this becomes important why we are not moving away from dollar, or we are not adopting de-dollarization right now. Okay, so next. Issue of India's economic growth versus emission. This is a topic very important in today's newspaper also. I will be basically discussing these because there are various aspects over here. Right now, we'll be one by one discussing and analyzing it. The India's economic growth versus emission. So it is basically talking about that, see, economic growth takes place and how the emissions are basically produced by the country. How are they related? Are they related or not related? So there's a particular word that comes here. This is known as decoupling. Decoupling. Now see, please understand. When I talk about decoupling, it basically talks about breaking the link between the economic growth and the environmental degradation. So what does it mean? Decoupling in this, with respect to this article, what does it talk about? It talks or mentions that delinking the economic growth and environmental degradation. And over here, plus obviously it includes the concept of emission. Right. So what does it mean? That means if the concept of economic growth is taking place, it should not be that it leading to environmental degradation also. So decoupling over here is talking about the concept. Please remember, decoupling is a generic word. It can be used even for transport also, linking things also. With respect to this article, we are talking about decoupling as a means where if the concept of economic growth is taking place, it doesn't mean that emission should also rise. That means these two concepts should be delinked. That is what is the concept of decoupling over here. Now comes the aspect, as we study this, what do we realize? See, just a minute. If we study this aspect, what does this article basically say? See, economic survey is of the view that there is already decoupling with respect to economic growth and emission. Now, it views that there is decoupling between whom? Between economic growth and environmental degradation. Clear? So this is the view of the Economic Survey 23-24. Now, do you think that this is true? In the article that is mentioned, it says it is not completely true. We need to see this. The reality is, between 2005 and 2019, the GDP compound annual growth rate, CAGR, compound annual growth rate is 7%. While the emissions that have going on is at a compound annual growth rate of 4%. That means both are growing. That also at a compounded annual growth rate. So you cannot say that these are delinked. That is what is the important thing. Though the economic survey says it is delinked, it is not actually delinked. Now comes the aspect of decoupling types that this particular article mentioned. If you come over here, if you see over here, it mentions about certain terms like absolute decoupling occurs when the economy grows while emissions decrease. Now see, if I talk about, let us see, then we'll come to the other context of the article. It says that absolute decoupling means that there is GDP growth rate, let us say GDP, or let us say economic growth rate. Economic growth rate, growth is there. Economic growth, that means high economic growth, but emission is decreasing. So in a way, if I want to represent in a form of a graph, you can see that I can say it in a form that, okay, this is the economic growth rate, and on the other hand, I can say, let us say, this is the emission, which is decreasing. So that means now we can say absolute decoupling, that with the economic growth rate increasing, the emission is decreasing. So there is no direct relation with respect to the economic growth and the emission. In fact, it is the opposite thing that is happening. So this is known as the absolute decoupling, right, with respect to environmental growth, as economic growth, and the environmental degradation, or emission as a basically representation of the environmental degradation. Now, if I move ahead, there is one more concept, is relative decoupling. Relative decoupling. Now, if you come back to the article again, now see, the article mentions over here, see, when we talk about while, if we talk about the absolute, however, relative decoupling happens when both GDP emissions grow, but the rate of GDP growth rate surpasses the rate of the emission. Now, what does it happen? See, relative decoupling means that, see, there is some decoupling, but not absolutely as we saw. So what do we see over here? That means, firstly, there is increase in what? Both economic growth rate, economic growth, yes, agree. Again, there is also increase in the emission also. Emission also. But the economic growth rate, is much higher than the emission or the emissions that are taking place, right? Now see here, if I want to draw it via a graph, can I draw it like this? That, okay, let us see that this is the, let us say, economic growth rate taking place. Let us say, put it as economic, hypothetically, economic growth. On the other hand, if I talk about the emission, if I can put it in a way that, okay, emission is also taking place, but it is growing at this particular rate, not at that rate. So let us say emission. So now this is the relative decoupling, that is both are increasing, but the economic growth is at a much rapid rate. Now, India's case. Now, please understand what the article mentions over here. We'll add certain other value additions to this. The question that arises is the economic survey correct in this perspective? No. See, we can see no in one perspective and yes also, but how we'll see that there is no absolute decoupling. That is very clear. But there is significant aspect of relative decoupling, where we saw 7% compounded annual growth rate with respect to economy and 4% growth rate with respect to the emission that is taking place. So that means we see a rise. Now please understand India stand. So what we can come to this conclusion is, see, India is undergoing relative decoupling. There are certain other things we need to analyze. See, we are right now. So let us see some fact check. See, let us see the certain thing is that we know that currently close to, let us say, 42% electricity is via renewable, or let us say clean energy, to be more right. On the other hand, Government of India stand is also that on the other hand, our coal utilization and production, coal utilization and production will peak around 2035 to 2040. So that means there are going to be more emissions in the future also. But along with it, we realize that, okay, economic growth should also take place, which is again going. We won't say at a very high growth rate, but again, we can realize that the economic growth rate is much higher than the emissions that are taking place, because India is also adopting various environment-friendly policies, programs. Again, we had the COP29 taking place at Baku also. So we have that instance of COP29 at Baku. That also makes an impact where where the developing countries are getting $300 billion annually from the developed countries. So those things do make an impact. But in the future, we will be realizing that again, the decoupling is very relative in nature. And possibly that in the future, we might see the emissions further rising, because India is a developing country right now. So this is what was a concept that was explained. And these concepts are important from the perspective of your civil services examination. Let's move ahead. Prelims topics. High inflation, RBI, repo rate is 6.5, Monetary Policy Committee. So what is the Monetary Policy Committee? Please understand. We have done this many times, but again, it was in the newspaper. Origination. Under section 45ZB of the amended RBI Act in 2016, the central government is empowered to constitute a 6-member Monetary Policy Committee. Now, what is the objective of creating this committee? See, under section 35ZB, it lays down that the Monetary Policy Committee shall determine the policy rate required to achieve the inflation target. So the major role is to manage and balance the inflation. And for that, this monetary policy is created. Now, the decision of the Monetary Policy Committee shall be binding on the bank. Right? So what this monetary policy says, the RBI is bound by the decision. So that will be the decision taken by the bank itself. Composition, section 35ZB says that MPC shall consist of 6 members. RBI governors are the ex officio chairperson, deputy governor in charge of the monetary policy, an officer of the bank to be nominated by the central bank or central board, and 3 persons to be appointed by the central government. So in a way, you are realizing that the 6th member has 3 members representing the Government of India and 3 members from the RBI. And in case of, let us say, a tie in a decision, then the RBI governor has a casting vote in order to decide. For example, let us say the 3 members from the government side says reduce the repo rate, or repo rate should be reduced so that there is more liquidity in the market. On the other hand, we realize that 3 people from their RBI governor, deputy governor, and the 1 officer that is appointed by the central board says that no, we should keep it as it is. In that case, there is a tie. So in that case, RBI governor will have a casting vote on what the repo rate or what should be the decision with respect to controlling the inflation with respect to the decision of the RBI. So this is what is the Monetary Policy Committee that you should be aware of. Let's move ahead. 2 months stock of anti-TB drugs available. Over here, we realize that Pradhan Mantri TB Mukt Abhiyan is again a very important program. Now, what it is? See, the problem why this program is there is a lot of burden with respect to tuberculosis in India. Now, something that has been continuing from years because a lot of factors are there. But if you see the statistics given by the Government of India also, you're realizing globally and with respect to India, a total of 1.5 million people died from TB and an estimated 10 million people fell with tuberculosis worldwide in 2020. Now, this is a global figure, particularly with respect to the developing countries, Africa and the Asian nations. And India has the world's highest tuberculosis burden with an estimation of 26 lakh people. Just imagine that. People contracting this disease and approximately 4 lakh people that are dying from this disease every year. That is why this is a major concern. That is why the government of India launched the Pradhan Mantri TB Mukt Abhiyan. Now what it is, please understand. It is an initiative by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare to accelerate so that there is elimination of TB in India by 2025. Right now we are very far away from that, because again, the initiative was again invigorated by, or let us say focused by the government since 2018, but we saw then the COVID coming up and that aggravated the situations and basically altered the targets that should be. But still in that case also, we are very far away because the burden of TB in India is very high. Objective: to provide additional patient support to improve treatment outcome of TB patients. Argument: community involvement, meetings, commitment to end TB by 2025. Leverage CSR, corporate social responsibility, so that the corporates also play a role directly or indirectly through their initiatives and the profits that they earn, so that they can help in elimination of TB. Components: 𝐑𝐄𝐂𝐎𝐿 Mitra initiative. It is to ensure additional diagnostics, nutritional and vocational support to the TB treatment. Now, 𝐑𝐄𝐿 Mitra as the donor, those who can support by adopting healthcare facilities from the individual donors. That means individual donors who can adopt a, let us say, even a hospital or a block or a region where you can basically put in efforts through various resources, through funding also, to, let us say, improve the conditions and help in contributing towards elimination of TB is again very important here. 𝐑𝐄𝐿 digital portal will provide platform for community support for the persons with TB. Now, this is again the program that you should be aware of. Next, Employment Provident Fund Organization, EPFO. Again, many appear for this examination via UPSC. A brief idea should be there, because this small things can be asked in your preliminary examination. Now see, it is a government organization that manages the Provident Fund and the pension accounts of the member employees and implements what? It implements the Employee Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1950. So it is responsible for implementation of this act. Now it is under which ministry? It is administered by the Ministry of Labor and Employment under Government of India. That is something that you should be aware of. It is one of the world's largest social security organization with respect to the clientage and the number of large accounts with respect to even the value that they has. So that is again very important over here. If we move ahead, we have a organization OCCRP, that is Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. What is this? This was in the newspaper. A small article was there. I picked up that because UPSC tends to pick up such small articles that are there. So let's see. See, OCCRP is a non-profit investigative reporting portal for more than 50 plus independent media outlets around the world, publishing more than 100 investigations a year. So this is again a non-profit organization platform where 50 plus media outlets again contributing, which are again working together in a way so that investigations or things can be basically come out which are hidden from the public platforms. So this is again like a non-profit investigative organization in a way working, contributing, let us say, taking inputs from various media outlets, along with it having the reporters contributing to this, so that you can basically bring out those news which individually is not possible by few journalists. So what happens? It was founded in 2006 to conduct transnational investigative reportings and promote technology-based approaches to expose organized crimes and corruptions worldwide. So because if you talk about organized crime, it is not limited to one country. For example, if you talk about drugs, you will be realizing that in India, if you're talking about drugs limited to certain states, no, it is very widely limited, very widely expanded to various countries. Because see, let us say if you find a drug in Delhi, it might be rooted from Nepal, which might have come from Pakistan, which might have indirectly come from Afghanistan. Along with it, again, the people who are involved in that might be sitting in some other country like Russia. So it is something that is linked to various countries where the investigations will involve these people who might not be part of the government, those media outlets which are spread across the world, which might be working together to taking out those investigations and investigating across the world the related issues which is under the concern. So that is why we say it aims to develop and equip global network of investigation journalists and publish their stories related to these crimes and issues. With this, OCCRP exposes crimes and corruption so that public can hold the power to account. That means these tend to bring out reports where they hold the governments or the people who have indulged in some organized crime or people in power who have done something wrong to be accountable for any wrongdoing or mishappening or have been involved in any crime and expose them in front of the public. Now, vision, a world where lives, livelihood and democracy are not threatened by crime and corruption. Now, this is again what the vision. Next, OCCRP provides media outlets and journalists with a range of critical resources and tools, including digital and physical security, allows those covering most sensitive topics with teams and trusted editors. So that means they are basically giving support to the editors and journalists also through, let us say, physical support, or let us say through technical tools and technologies, through resources, so that there is no hindrance with respect to their investigation that is taking place. OCCRP-LF, what does it mean? It is an investigative data platform where journalists can basically search and cross-reference more than 3 billion records to trace the criminal connections and patterns. So this is again a digital platform where you can, it is a resource pool of investigation that is present there, where, for example, if you want to trace a particular person with respect to certain criminal aspects which you view might be there, you can even search with respect to this data, OCCRP-LF, where this data platform provides information about all these things to a great extent. For example, if you want to investigate one person, related information related to that person might be present there. That is very useful with respect to linking the points and how the particular person might be involved in some or the other form of organized crime. Again, participation with respect to even civil society, participation with respect to social activists also takes place. But again, this is a form, what we say as the fourth pillar, democratic structure, where these organizations work as a means of checks and balances towards the various governments across the world and towards in the field of criminal and as well as organized crime investigative journalism. If we move ahead, Mullaperiyar Dam, again, a little bit idea you should be knowing. It is in the state of Kerala. You can see over here, this is the map over here. This is Tamil Nadu, this is Kerala, and then you have this Mullaperiyar Dam located over here. Along with it, there are various other power projects that are there. Now, seeing this particular map, important thing is understanding. It is a masonry gravity dam situated on the Periyar River. If you see over here, this is the Periyar River that is basically going on, and the dam is situated on that. It in the Idukki district in Kerala, located in 881 meters above the sea level in the Cardamom Hills of the Western Ghats. Now, these are certain things which can be asked in your prelims with respect to on which river the dam is, what all hills are, let us say, close to it or where it is located. These things are important. The dam is built at the confluence of Mullar and Periyar River. That is why it gets its name. Construction began in 1887 and was completed in 1895. The construction was carried out by the British Corps of the Royal Engineers under the leadership of Peniquick. That is not required for you, but only thing is that it was a construction that was made by the Britishers. The dam was constructed with limestone and surkhi, that means a burned brick powder and a mixture of sugar and calcium oxide. Again, the dam is 150 feet high to 1,200 feet long. Dam's primary function is to transfer water from the Periyar River to the Vagai River basin in Tamil Nadu. This distributes water to approximately a region in Tamil Nadu, facilitating irrigation to large regions of 6,85,000 hectares. The construction of the dam paved the way for the creation of artificial lake in the center of the reserve. The Periyar National Park is located in the dam's reservoir. So now this is again important dimension. One more thing is, although the dam is located in Kerala, it is operated and maintained by Tamil Nadu, which has a lease of 999 years. Important. In the state of Kerala, but operated by and maintained by the state of Tamil Nadu. This is again something that you can be asked in your preliminary examination. Okay, let's move ahead. ESMA. So, Essential Services Maintenance Act, what it is? Essential Services Maintenance Act 1968 has been invoked. It is enacted in 1968, was enacted to ensure delivery of certain services which, if restricted, would affect the normal life. There are certain services which, if, let us say, medical facilities or let us say basic commodities, if they are let us say, restriction or some strike or certain issue happens that will create a ruckus in the society. So when this act is invoked, you cannot basically go on strike or let us say abandon your work in a way, unless and until obviously there is health issues, but not just to bargain or protest. So that means certain services have to be maintained during this time. In a way, strike is also banned during this time. So what happens is, the law made by the Parliament of India under the list number 33 in the concurrent list of the Schedule 7 of the Constitution, the services fall under this category are related to public conservation, sanitation, water supply, hospitals, or national defense as essential. That means these are the people who will be the major things. You cannot basically go on strike also during this time. Any establishment involved in producing, delivery, and distributing petroleum, coal, electricity, steel, fertilizer also are classified as providing essential services aside from any banking-related services subject to ESMA. This statute also applies to communication and transport services and any government initiative relating to the acquisition and distribution. That means over here, the people involved in this cannot go on strike. They cannot leave their work right now, because what happens is that very often when there is a possibility certain mishap might happen, or let us say important event is taking place, and over there if the, let us say, medical staff goes on leave, then there's a possibility that might create ruckus in the society during that time, and essential commodities and services are hit. That is why often we see governments invoking the Essential Services Maintenance Act, so that the essential services, their flow is not impacted. Now, the problem that arises is, see, irresponsible use. Act has been criticized sometimes because it is irresponsibly and unwisely can be implemented any time. That means you are basically restricting the right to strike also. Now, suppression of democratic rights. ESMA is seen as a monopolizing power and suppressing the democratic right of stakeholders, particularly the right to protest or strike. Then, government's overpowering role. Critics argue that ESMA dangerously skews the balance in the industrial relation towards the government and the public sector. So that means it is favorable for the industries, not with respect to the labor that is there. Again, a criticism. So let's move ahead. Last topic is Vibrant Village Program. That was one of the articles that was present in the newspaper. See, over here, what is Vibrant Village Program? It is a centrally sponsored scheme. Centrally sponsored scheme means that the contribution by the central government and the state government both would be made. That means center plus state are going to contribute, right? Aims at a comprehensive development of the border villages. Again, very, very important, because see, this is with respect to the border village development. To develop villages in 46 blocks of the 19 districts in 4 state and 1 union territory. Allocation of 4,800 crores for the fiscal year from 2022 to 25-26. Initially, 662 borders will be confined to Arunachal Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh, then Ladakh, Sikkim, Uttarakhand. So these are the things that you should be remembering. Okay, let's move ahead. Multiple choice questions. Quickly we'll do it. Question 1. Options. Solution. Question 2 with the options. Solution. Question 3 with the options. Solution. Question 4. Options. Solution. Question 5. Options. Solution. So while seeing the questions, you can basically pause the video and see it. It is an important means of practice. So hope you analyze the today's discussion, analysis of the Hindu, and hopefully it was helpful for gaining knowledge and a holistic manner for the preparation for the civil services examination. We'll be meeting tomorrow again, continuing with the daily analysis of the Hindu. Take care and Jai Hind.